know somebody gonna inevitably grab it.
Assalamu alaikum. We're going to go ahead and get started with our program with our first storyteller. As many of us know, storytelling is a big part of our history, not only as just African Americans, but going back to the original continent of Africa. Storytellers were the ones who handed down the traditions and the highlights of what was going on throughout the villages, throughout the different areas in the community. So this is a part of our history that has continued. And our first speaker is Brother Mustafa Carroll. He's been in the community. He's a pioneer, and he's dedicated to service. I'm not going to read his full bio, but he is the executive director of CARE Texas. And he's going to give you a lot of the history on his role as a servant, not only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but his role in service into justice for our people and for all people. So thank you very much. We'd like to present to you Brother Mustafa Carroll. Takbir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Walhamdulillah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalat wassalat wa ajma'in. Wa nasta'inahu wa nastaghfiruhu wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Assalamu alaikum. I'm still trying to adjust to this pioneer status. You know, I'm still on that river in Africa called the Nile, you know. And I guess I am a pioneer by now, you know. I can't even lie about it anymore because my oldest grandson is in his second year of college. So, hey, I guess that make you a pioneer, huh? I didn't, but just wanted to share with you a little bit of my journey into Islam. I actually was born and raised in Gary, Indiana. I come from a family of 4 boys. My father was a steel worker. My mother was a nurse. I left Gary after high school, attended Indiana University where I did my undergraduate work in biology and psychology, met my wife there, got married, had 2 kids in Indiana well over 30 years ago, and then moved to Texas and had 2 more kids here. Same woman. So I was in college. Before I left Gary, I come from a very devout Christian family, and I come from all of my great uncles and people are pastors. My first cousins are all pastors. My brothers deacons in their church. One was a chaplain in the Navy for 22 years. So when I went to college, the first thing I did was found me a church home. You know, I know you know that. Yeah, church home. I was 18 years old, and I was still on that journey. I had read all of the Bible by the time I was 14. So when I got to college, I was still very sincere on my way to being a pastor, actually. And through my study and my asking questions, and every time I'd ask some of the pastors a question, they tell me, "Don't question God," or what are you asking that for, etc. So I just kept studying. I must have researched every sect of Christianity you can think about. I was reading my Bible regularly. Nobody knew it because I was having such a good time in college. But I was really researching. I played ball, and a friend of mine I played ball with was a Muslim. And so one day, you know, I asked him, we were talking, we always talked about politics. And one day, the conversation shifted to religion. And he said, "Well, I'm a Muslim." I say, "Really?" I say, "Well, who you with, Nation of Islam?" And he said, "No, I'm not." I say, "Well, who you with then?" Because that's all we knew at that time. You know, they were out in the streets and everything. So actually, he explained who he was. You know, he was Orthodox, etc. And then it was funny because I had there was another friend I met, a brother, Fred Tenex, in college. Fred Tenex. And Fred Tenex was a teacher at one of the schools in New York. Probably right there on 125th Street or wherever the school was. And he came to me, I don't know how many times to try to get me to go with him, and I did. I went to Louisville, Kentucky, and was at the temple there. I went to Indianapolis, and then there was a brother that came to speak at IU, Brother Jasper Tenex. I never will forget him. And he was giving the whole spiel, how the pig come from a rat, a cat, and a dog, and about Yaqub, and all of the story that goes with it. And there was a brother there. I didn't know at the time where he was from, but he's very dark. He's from Saudi Arabia. And the brother, after Brother Jasper spoke, the brother stood up and he said, "Brother," and he couldn't hardly speak in English, but he said, "Islam is for all the people." So anyway, long story short, I talked to him for probably 3 days. And after the third day, I took my Shahada. I said, "Okay, that's it. That's it. I know this is it." And he looked at me and said, "Are you sure?" Because he didn't know it. I had been studying for a while. And when I heard that, I said, "This is it." And he didn't even have a great command of the language. He was broken English, but his words were so on point that I was enthralled with him. So I took it. I called my folks and told my folks that I became a Muslim. And I said, "Dad," I said, I've become a Muslim, and I want to come home this weekend and talk to y'all about it. He said, "Well, come on home then." Just come on home. We're going to talk. So I did. When I got there, my father had bought these books on Islam. And when I went to telling him about Islam, he started telling me about Islam. And they pretty much said, my mother was scared that I was, as she say, preaching hate. But my parents actually did okay with it. But they still didn't give me a whole lot of respect. I still didn't get any real respect. So I think the thing that really changed my life, I mean, it took me on this journey has been something else, because that was the one thing that I think was the most significant thing I had ever done. The second thing that I would attribute to is, getting married. A few years, just a couple, 2-3 years after that, I met my wife and we got married. And that was the second most significant thing that I had done in life. And we've been married now 38 years. But so and my wife didn't know anything about Islam. When I met her, the first thing I told her, "I'm a Muslim." And she said, "Well, what's that?" And then I told her, "Well, that means we believe in one God," and so forth and so on. So, and before we got married, which was shortly thereafter, she took her Shahada. Same brother gave me my Shahada, gave her Shahada. And we became Muslims. And we went to college, so I was some Sudanese brothers that I met. The whole masjid, they were very nice. I mean, everybody. I was probably one of the few African Americans in the masjid. The masjid was packed, and it was people from everywhere, from Saudi Arabia, Persia, Iran, everywhere. And I didn't realize that the imam was actually facilitating every sect giving a khutbah, because I didn't even know they were different sects. But he had facilitated everybody giving a khutbah, whoever was there. He made sure that everybody got a chance to give a khutbah, from these various sects. And the brothers, when I first met, everybody hugged me and all this kind of stuff, and they kept inviting me to dinner and to breakfast and to lunch. And I said, "Man, these are the eatingest people I ever met." And I was still kind of rough. I mean, in them days, I was really a rough character. And I'd come in there. I didn't know any better about anything. They said, "Well, Brother Mustafa, I want you to come over for breakfast tomorrow." I said, "Well, what time?" "Well, once you get there, can you get there at 6?" I said, "Dang, they eat early." But I didn't realize until later that these brothers were actually trying to teach me my prayers. So I would come over there at that time, and we'd pray, and then we'd eat. Then somebody said, "Well, come to my house it wasn't a house. We were all students. So come to my room or my house, my apartment." And then we would do door prayer, and so forth and so on. And it just kept going like that. And so I started immediately. They asked me to do a lot of work in the community, just real simple stuff, but I was enjoying it because that's all I wanted to do was help. So they had, Brother Mustafa, we need a sign for the masjid, and I knew where to get a sign from, so I got the first sign. And Brother Mustafa, we're going to have a convention here. The MSA at that time was one of the largest conventions. And that was the first convention I went to up in Toledo, Ohio. And so this is before my wife now. This is before I had any marriage or anything, but I got, I still had a little girlfriend, so I took her with me up there. And when I got there, the brothers, they all about my age or younger, and the brothers was asking me, brother, is that your wife? And I said, no, that's my girlfriend. The brothers say, brother, it ain't no girlfriend in Islam. You got to get married. I say, it ain't none. I say, well, what y'all do? They say, you need to get that sister. Y'all need to get married. I say, well, suppose you ain't ready to get married. He said, well, you can't be with her. And I'm looking at these guys like, what are you talking about? Well, how am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to get married. Well, long story short, she wasn't ready to be Muslim, so that was it. And it wasn't ugly. It was just, went away. And but that was my first experience with it. And I met a brother there, Wali Akram. Imam Wali, he's in Cleveland, established, I think, the first Cleveland mosque. He was he must have been 70-something then. He had run away from Chicago when his life was threatened because he was akin to, friends with Malcolm. And he was just a kind, gentle. Every time I saw him, he was smiling, typical grandfather type personality. His whole family was Muslims. I think all his relatives now inherited, that masjid, or they are very active to this day. And he kept coming up to me, winking, and say, I do weddings, and I thought I would wink right back at him, but I wasn't getting married. But it was just a great experience. And I remember him sitting us down, all us young guys, and he said, there's a turn on and a turn off in Islam. You can either turn somebody on or turn them off. And I saw in his behavior what he meant, because he wasn't as harsh, but he was really, he was really gentle, kind, and that really, it was a turn on. Because, at that time, I didn't know. Nobody ever told me what you do to get married in Islam. And I think it's just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me that way that I got a wife that was really religious and had been raised in a really strict home. But nobody had told us. We learned everything by error, trial and error. So anyway, we when we finished college, we were talking about where were we going to go. And we said, well, we wanted to move down south. Well, if I was going to go to Charleston, to South Carolina. I had worked in Charleston one summer when I was in school. And then my brother, who had finished, they were coming here to teach school, him and his wife. And they came, and so I said, well, let's just go to Houston. At that time, Houston was booming. And so we came to Houston, and this is where I got involved in the community here. We got involved, and I'm going to tell you, the one that really got me involved at this masjid, when it was the Belford Masjid, was the Imam Kamaluddin. And I met Imam Kamaluddin because we would go to a halaqah every Saturday morning. We would a halaqah out in Missouri City because Imam, he lived out in that area. And Imam Kamaluddin was there. Imam Khalid Shaheed, who's up in Dallas now, came to it. There were some other brothers that came. It was a good mix of folks. And the way I met Imam